question is, when you started working with a knife, how old were you?
About 15.
Why did you pick up a knife?
My father was my first martial art teacher, and it was part of what he was teaching me at the time. And I lived in New York City, so it was a good idea.
How do you think? What pushed the person to start working with a knife?
Depends on what part of the country you live in. If you live in an area that it's a tool where you're cutting boxes or doing something with your work, that's one thing. But if you are thinking about protection or self-defense, living in a big city or living someplace where it's not so safe, of course, having a knife or something is not a bad idea, because in a lot of areas, it's not possible to carry a gun or a pistol or something. Like in some states in the U.S., you can carry a pistol, carry something that is more better to use for self-defense than a knife. A knife generally shouldn't be a primary weapon, but a secondary weapon. Primary being something like a handgun, of course.
How many years do you teach this knife fighting?
Years, probably about at least 25, at least.
Could you mind to share with us about your system of knife fighting?
I call it the keep it simple, pointed in, goes in this way method. It's been influenced a lot by Western methods, like, for example, fencing and also Filipino martial arts. But I've also seen Native American Indian styles of knife fighting, Spanish, and even recently the French way, what they used to use with some of the people in France. But a lot of it is the footwork and the basic entries. A lot of it is based on Western fencing, like primarily the Hungarian saber and even some Bowie knife fighting.
Could you mind to share with us 5 main principles that underlines in your system?
The basic stuff is it's all functional. It's all based on the entry. Without a good entry, you don't have anything. We do some Filipino-based cutting of the limb for limb destruction and so on, but vital target acquisition is important as well. Like anything, when you're under stress, everything has to be very, very simple, because the body can't do complicated techniques when you're getting tunnel vision or when you're under a lot of pressure. So everything we do is pressure tested to make sure that it's going to be effective in a real situation. We use basic patterns, but they're not based on technique. It's more concept. For example, when you protect a certain part of your body, then that's the concept or conceptual thinking that we work with. This way, we don't have to do painting by the numbers or trying to remember something that is very mechanical. We like to work on spontaneous reaction. For example, in your country, you're familiar with the Sistema, correct? So the Sistema knife fighting I've seen that have been demonstrated in this country, I've seen that they're very also working on a lot of feeling what needs to be done and spontaneous reaction. I do something similar in that we're working more on feel rather than being mechanical with technique. But everything is only based on 5 points of entry or 5 attacks and 5 reactions on different zones of the body, both left and right and in the center. So really you only start with 5 methods of attack and defense. I don't believe in anything too fancy, because again, anything too fancy is going to get you killed, I don't know how to translate this into Russian, but tell her that you watch me now. Mm-hmm. Point the end goes in this way.
Could you mind to share with us about these 5 reactions?
Oh, they're just based on the zones. You have your attack to one side, attack to the other, the same thing to the body, and a thrust. Anything that comes to the top of the head is considered the same reaction as a thrust, because you're working the same line. So it's not so much technique as it is to habitually put your body where it needs to be in reaction to what's going on.
Could you mind to share with us how do you start teaching your students?
I use minimal protection because I want to keep it real and keep people a little bit on edge. No pun intended. I don't like people to be reckless. They have to be respectful of the weapon. And mainly because sparring is not realistic. It's based on two people aware of what's going to happen. They already have their practice and training weapons out. So, yes, it's practical in terms of teaching people distance and timing and all of that. But it's not reality. It's just a little bit of a fun game or a sport. Sparring is important, but it shouldn't take the place of realistic training on learning your environment, your terrain, and also how to do deployment of the weapon. So we practice a lot of deployment, and we also practice a lot of situational awareness based on your environment.
Can you tell us, please, today we have such a situation when one person have a training for the 3-5 years in the gym with a knife fighting, and when he faced real situation on the street, actually he doesn't know what to do. He just run away. Why does it happen?
That's impossible to predict. I mean, why does anybody do anything? I mean, is it fear? Is it lack of training? Is it because he had no confidence in what he did? Or maybe running away was the best thing he could have done because he was smart.
How do you think? Does it important to have psychological preparation before the person start working with a knife?
Essential. If you don't have that, you might as well not even train.
Do you do a preparation of your students, psychological preparation for your students before?
We do it not only before, but also continuously during the training too. Because if you're not ready and able to do what you have to do, any weapon that you have on you is useless if you don't have the ability to use it when the situation comes.
How do you start this psychological preparation?
Sure. Most people are, and I don't mean to pick on women, but a lot of women in particular feel squeamish. They don't have the ability because they feel bad or they don't want to really hurt anybody. So they have a hard time getting very nasty with a weapon. So I use a lot of creative visualization. We use visualization to create situations that will put people under a little bit of stress or anxiety to see how they're going to react in that particular situation. For example, a mother protecting her child or a husband protecting somebody that he really loves. And then we work with that kind of mindset and that mental imagery to propel them to see what they can do or what they're capable of.
Does it important for you which knife to use, short or long or some else?
That's always been a very good question that people ask. It depends on how much you can put on your body and where you live. If you're living in an area where you have a heavy jacket or a heavy coat, you can probably wear something bigger. But if you're in a place where it's very hot all the time, you need something that's not going to be so obvious. Sometimes people can carry a knife and it's out and nobody says anything. But if it's hidden on your body, you have to take that into consideration. A lot of people buy very expensive knives. To me, that's ridiculous because if you have a box cutter or a screwdriver for $3 or $4 American, you can throw it away because after you use something, you have to throw it away anyway. So I don't believe in buying really, really expensive knives. To me, that's kind of a waste of money.
Can you tell us, please, what is the difference with preparation of the working with the sticks and working with the knife?
That's a very good question. A lot of people get confused. They think that it's the same thing, that the stick represents the knife, but it doesn't. The stick is a blunt impact weapon, so it's based more on hard targets, for example, bone, and it's meant more for shattering, destroying in terms of impact. but a blade is meant to cut. So the two are not the same thing. They're totally different. If you're practicing cane when you're walking in the street or you're practicing with a stick, it can be very practical because you have an immediate weapon that you can use and you don't have to cause as much damage as you would with a knife. But the stick also works to similar angles as how you would use a knife. So if you slash with a stick or you slash with a knife, it's the same general point of entry. But of course, the reaction on how you use a knife in terms of cutting or stabbing is totally different. For example, thrusting is going to be very different with a knife than it would be with a stick, of course. But if you're sparring and you have the ability to spar with the stick, you can work similar concepts as if you had a knife. But of course, things like distance, timing, and so on are going to be different when you have a shorter weapon. That's why sometimes it's also good to practice with a very long-edged weapon like a saber or a bolo or something of that nature, because you have a nice combination of length and also an edge. But steel seeks flesh and stick seeks bone, because an impact weapon like a stick is going to be more effective against a hard target, and a blade is going to be more effective against a soft target. Basically, that's it, I guess. Anything more you want to know about that?
Can you tell us, please, what is the most important thing with working with a knife, and what's the most important thing with working with a stick? Because it has different distances. Knife is very useful for the short distance, and the stick is very useful for the long distance.
Well, you could have a very short stick and a very long knife too. But again, it's conceptual. You know, the stick might inform you or give you the concepts that you can use working on principles or angles that you can use similarly with a knife. But again, the end result is going to be different because one, again, is a blunt impact weapon and one has an edge. Usually when people train students to, not always, but most of the time, when people understand how to use a stick and how to use a knife, they teach people first the stick and then the knife after. Generally speaking, they don't put people on a knife right away unless it's a special situation like military or law enforcement or something like that.
Do you have in your system any certain tactic and strategy?
Of course.
Could you mind to share?
Whenever you do anything, you have to have, first of all, the right mindset and willing to do what you have to do. So first and foremost is what I call in English is willful intention. I don't know how you're going to translate that, but that's what I think. You know, if you don't have the right mindset and the right intention on doing what the situation calls for, then it doesn't matter what kind of weapon you have. Whether you have no weapon or a weapon, you're going to be in trouble. So first and foremost, you have to have the right mindset. Everything else is secondary. So we always start with the right intention. Not everybody can do in a situation what needs to be done. For example, you asked me that question of the person running before. That's a hard thing to answer because the context of what that person found themselves in, I don't know. So it's very difficult to try to answer why people do what they do when they're confronted with violence. So we teach the patterns, we teach the mindset, and we teach the concept of intention, and then work with it from there. We also do a lot of stress testing where people are put under a lot of pressure to see what their reaction is going to be to work themselves out of that situation. But again, everything has to be very, very simple and very, very basic, because people have learned from shooting that when you get under a stress situation, you have tunnel vision. So a lot of your peripheral nervous system starts to shut down, and you only have to focus, or you can only function on the basic allowance of what your body is going to give you physiologically. When you have fear and an adrenaline dump, I mean in English they call it adrenaline dump, then generally anything fancy that someone's going to do in terms of fine motor control is impossible. So in situations like that, you have to teach a very aggressive mindset where you attack the attacker and not think defensively anymore. So in situations like that, teaching the simple, basic Western fencing methods of a timed hit or a stopped hit is very effective. A lot of the Western fencing techniques are very good for knife fighting or self-defense with a knife because it's based on attacking the attacker on his time. So if all you can do is teach somebody to get off the line and move forward aggressively, it might save their life. So that's why I always say keep it simple. But again, everything has to start with the right mindset. You have to have the willful intention to do what the situation calls. You have to do what I call suspending judgment. Because if you're not a priest or a pastor or some kind of thing like that, your place is not to have judgment. Your place is to go home safe to your loved ones. So in a way, it's very biblical. It's better to give than to receive.
John, how do you think? Why today we have so many teachers of knife fighting?
There's the expression caveat emptor, buyer beware. And there's a lot of people who I feel are going to do something because it's a fad or something that's very trying to capitalize on marketing. Just because it looks like an onion doesn't mean it's an onion. So when something becomes a big fad or a popular, like somebody says, oh, they become a ninja or they become taekwondo or they become something, then people change their signs on their schools to become capitalizing on what is becoming popular now in the market. But many people who are uneducated and their eyes are not trained can't tell the difference between what's real and what's fantasy. A lot of people like the fancy stuff because it's very pretty and a lot of fun, but that fancy stuff is what's going to get you killed in reality. My basic attitude is keep it simple and keep it effective and lots of repetition so it becomes in your DNA and your motor control. But some people might look at what I'm doing and say it's very boring, you know. But hold on, my goal is not to be an entertainer. My goal is to get you home safe.
John, could you mind to share with us? Do you have any certain criteria according to which you can understand who is the real master and who is not?
That's hard because a lot of people look really good and they have a lot of arrogance. So it looks as if they know a lot. So that's a tough question. I'll try to answer it, but translate that first. A lot of people wear beautiful uniforms and make great faces, and they also have lots of paper hanging on the wall. But to me, this is the equivalent of a big circus. I might as well go and get entertained and see some elephants because at least they're more fun to watch. But you have to look at the person's basic pattern of movement, their skill, where they learned from and what their intentions are, who they've been teaching, and so on. It's like anything in the martial art world. You have a lot of clowns who can do good juggling and stuff, but nothing to do with martial arts. So maybe one day if I come visit you guys, we can all go out to the circus and see the elephants, yes?
John, do you have in your system a logical model, and how does it look?
First of all, I'm not an eagle or a bear or a snake or a tiger. I'm a man. So I'm not going to jump around the ground like a snake or run around like an idiot flapping my wings like a bird because I'm a man. So I'm going to fight like a man. Too many people watch too many kung fu movies and think that they have to become something like a tiger or something. That's ridiculous. If God made me a man or you a woman, why are we fighting like a snake? We're superior to those things, no? So first off, we have to fight as who we are, as human beings. And the rest of that craziness we leave in the circus and in the movies. Right?
Right. Can you tell us, please, do you have in your system some advantages from other systems?
Nothing new under the sun. You're going to see many things I do other people do. So I can say yes, but I can say no at the same time. If someone is honest, they're going to tell you that they're not doing anything different or new, but how they present the material might be different and new. My family is from Hungary and they make goulash, right? So I might make it look one way and the taste is different. So everybody has to experience a different taste, even though it looks the same. So when someone looks at something and they say, oh, we do that, that's not true. It's only by the shared experience of someone being in front of you on a level of touch and energy that you can tell the difference in what someone does. This is my criteria on what's real and not real.
John, how do you think? does the knife have some future in 21st century?
The knife has been around since the caveman, and we're still doing it now. So, what do you think?
How do you think that it's important for master or teacher to know traditions and history of knife and martial arts?
It depends on if someone's very interested in tradition. If people practice a martial art for tradition, for the forms and for the beauty and all of that, that's fine. But people shouldn't be lied to about the difference between real self-defense and what's considered art. Anyone who's been locked up in prison, in jail, and so on, they could tell you that a knife is a primary weapon that they're going to use to take out their target. This is the mindset of what I'm talking about. It's your intention. Also, I'm sure that what happens with the prison knife fighting technique is going to be much better than almost any martial artist in the world. Because the knife is primarily a weapon of ambush, not fancy stuff. It doesn't become a big pageantry or a big, show or a big fancy thing. The person just sneaks up on you and just stabs you and end of story. To defend against this type of thing is very, very difficult, especially at night. You finished eating, you go to the movies, I take you out to dinner and we have a meal and you go out to a movie and all of a sudden somebody comes with a knife. Very difficult to defend against something like that. So going back to the question of sparring before, if you're dealing with an ambush and somebody already had their knife out, there's no sparring anymore. Okay, now it's just about survival. That person has to go to the cemetery and you have to go to the emergency room. It's a fair trade. So again, it goes back to the mindset. It goes back to how you are trained mentally and how much you're willing to survive and do what the situation calls for. I hope that makes sense, because the circus we have to buy lots of peanuts.
Yes.
Because I love elephants and clowns, but not in the martial arts school.
What can you recommend to the persons that just started to practice knife fighting?
Don't rely on the teacher only. Do your own research and practice. And if it doesn't seem like it's practical or functional, always question what you're doing. If it seems too fancy, then maybe that's not the smart thing to do. Most people don't spend enough time in deployment. Any weapon you have on you, if you can't take it out in a moment of stress, it's useless. You might as well not even have it on you. Not enough people spend time on deployment, which to me is silly, because when you're sparring, you already have your weapons out and it's a game. So deployment and target acquisition should be primary in real knife fighting. Of course, coupled with the right mindset and intention. Otherwise, we're back in the circus again.
Could you mind to share with us about your teacher?
My father was my first teacher when I was about 4. And then from there, I trained with different people throughout my life who offered me something of value that I can share with others. But your biggest teacher always has to be yourself. You have to learn how to teach yourself. One of the biggest gifts one of my teachers told me is how to teach myself by being objective, being rational, and being intelligent to discern truth from fiction.
Could you tell us something more about your system?
Oh, goodness. I enjoy the ability to share my energy and my love for what I do with other people. Because to me, it's about love and having a connection with other people and to help them as best as I can. Everything else is just about helping the person from where they are and have them get skills that can help them become not only a better person, but also take care of themselves and their families. If a teacher doesn't have the right intention on why they're teaching, then that could be not a good thing. I believe in quality versus quantity. So I don't believe somebody might know many more beautiful techniques than me, but what I do it better. So I believe that if you have a handful of things that you can do out of reflex on both sides of your body under all kind of different situations, then you're doing okay. My system is the nothing fancy, keep it simple school. And my students have been from all kind of situations, military, all kind of law enforcement, regular people, and they're all still here. So I'd like to hope I'm doing something right. Very simple.
John, what is the knife for you?
Anything we do in life, if you're an artist, if you're doing painting, or you're doing writing, or you're doing music, it's an extension of your soul. So if you're a real martial artist, there comes a point in your training where you have to be the creator and not just routinely copy somebody else's idea. So for me, anything I have in my hands or anything I have in my heart or soul or spirit to do is an extension of who I am. And it changes all the time according to how I change and according to my experiences in life. So the knife can become a tool for attitude adjustment or something to end a situation quite brutally. Everything depends on the context.